Hey, look who it is. It's Jim. It's Friday. It's time to deploy. Jim, how are you?
I'm back. Yeah, I'm good now. Good. Been on holidays. Lucky enough to get COVID on the way back, of course. So
Oh, I'm
been
sorry to
away
hear
for a little
that.
bit. All good. All good.
So you're on the mend now. That's good.
On the mend. Yep. How are you?
Yep. Good, good. Been busy. I missed you, but I'm glad to have you back. We've been running the show without you. Lots of news and information that we've been able to share over the past weeks that you've been away. So you go on leave, then you get sick, and then you come back, and the world has changed, I guess. So,
Yeah, I bet.
but how's the week going? Are you back at work, or are you still kind of
I
recovering?
am. I am back at work. Yeah, no, it took me a little while to recover. It was horrible. We was waiting in the queue to get on the plane, and you hearing these people cough and sniffle behind you, and you're just like,
Yeah.
oh. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm
back at
getting that
work.
feeling again, like we had back in lockdown, where we had folks who were coughing, and you're like, "Uh-oh," because I know
Yeah,
that some of my friends and colleagues are getting, like yourself, are getting COVID
yeah.
again, and so it's one of those things. I'm hearing this at various sporting events that I'm going to. I'm hearing people cough, and
Mm,
you get that back of their mind trigger going off, like,
mm,
"Oh, that's I got to be
oh.
careful here." So anyway.
Yeah, totally.
All right, well, let's get it to it. Let me go ahead and through the magic of software, I will go ahead and share my screen. So, yeah, we've been pretty busy in the world of Octopus. We've been doing a lot of work relative to a lot of things, and we have a number of things that we're talking to folks about. So, just wanted to point you to a few articles that we've been posting about recently about multi-tenancy. So, a colleague of ours, Andy, has been writing a little bit about multi-tenancy. So, I mentioned this last week about his article entitled "What is Multi-Tenancy," where he talks about how multi-tenancy, the term itself, has different connotations or terms or meanings depending upon how you're using it. And so he defines it in terms of deployments and how you may want to break up deployments relative to various segments. But then he followed that up, not to be outdone with not to be outdone with a follow-up article entitled "Why Multi-Tenancy is a Confusing Term and What It Means to Octopus." So if you're a customer of Octopus and you've seen that tenants feature up in the menu bar and you've always kind of like avoided it because you don't know what it means, this might be an article worth reading because Andy goes into detail about some of the things that he talked about in his first article, but talks a little bit about how they're applicable to each of the segments that he was talking about relative to breaking up software relative to tenants. So talks about how you can break up a software relative to either a customer, its location, where it's hosted, or the model itself. We actually do this ourselves. If you think about this, we break up. You could consider spaces, I guess, in a certain sense, kind of like a tenant relative to a model, because you want to isolate from each other different types of things. But we do this across a variety of other segments as well. So when we talk about what level do you even define your multi-tenancy, Andy talks a little bit about, well, it depends. It depends on how you break this up, and he shares a personal story about how he was when he joined Octopus, for example. When he talks about what multi-tenancy means to Octopus, as a deployment tool, Octopus can help you deliver your software no matter the flavor of multi-tenancy your software uses. If you call it multi-tenancy, it is very likely Octopus will make your deployments faster and more reliable at scale. So the reason for this is nuanced and obviously requires to go into the details, but tenants are a very powerful capability of Octopus, and I don't think people really appreciate just how powerful tenants are when utilizing Octopus. I think most people just think of deployments as like, yeah, just chuck it over the wall and we're done. But it's more than that, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it definitely is. I know that the customers that do use tenants love them and need them. So yeah, having more people understand the nuance around this would
Yeah.
they could benefit from it. Mm.
Especially when you consider things like variables that cross-cut tenants, how you deploy tenants across various projects. You can connect tenants to certain projects. This is all Octopus. You can connect certain tenants to certain projects. You can disconnect them, etc. You can have variables for each one, as I mentioned earlier, and you can actually have these as basically deployments relative to your organization, or depending upon how you break it up. So if you're looking for an article to understand this a little bit better, check out Andy's blog post, which he's recently posted up on our blog. And speaking of our blog, we also, as I mentioned last week, we have Sean's article on how to deploy Azure Container Apps, which I mentioned last week. Good article there. And we have a bunch of other ones as well that we've mentioned in the past, which is great. So make sure to check that out. We're posting at least daily, if not weekly. We also have, speaking of tenants, we also have a webinar coming up next week with a friend of ours, Guestline. So Guestline is a customer of ours. They're based in the UK. And Matthew Ford, who's the software development manager at Guestline, will be joining myself on this webinar. The webinar is entitled How Guestline Saves 2,000 Hours Per Release Using Tenants in Octopus. So Matt and I will be talking about how Guestline utilizes tenants with Octopus for deploying across a whole range of different. They provide a SaaS model for their customers, and they use Octopus for that purpose. So Guestline is a hotel company that provides services to hotels, etc., and they provide a mechanism for managing reservations, etc., etc. So they utilize this for a bunch of hotels that utilize Guestline as part of that. And so this might be a webinar of interest, so go ahead and check that out. You can find all these at our webinars link, which is at octopus.com/webinars. And then later on, the following week, Jeffrey Palermo will be joining us, partner ClearMeasure, talking to us about database deployments with Octopus and ClearMeasure. So for those who don't know, databases can be deployed and managed via Octopus. There's a lot of ways in which you can use this. And in particular, typically what you'll see is the combination of Octopus Deploy used with a variety of solutions from Redgate. So Flyway, as an example, as part of a deployment process. And you can do this for a variety of operations, including schema comparisons. You can do diffs, you can do calcs, etc. So there's lots of stuff there. Another webinar that we haven't posted yet, but we'll be posting shortly, is our community town hall, which is at the end of every month. And that will be myself and a bunch of other folks from Octopus talking about the latest and greatest news at Octopus and all the stuff that's happened over the past month. So make sure to check that out at our webinars address. All right, Jim, I know a lot of this stuff will probably come fast and furious in terms of the news, but that's okay. So last week, or actually about 2 weeks ago, there was a tweet that went out that talked about how Stack Overflow's traffic has diminished greatly. Then it got revised. I think initially they said it had diminished by 50% or 30%. And it turns out those claims were greatly exaggerated. So this is a blog post that was recently published by the folks at Stack Overflow talking about, hey, listen, our decrease in traffic is only about 5%. And so this blog post talks about the reasons why. Now, I think that they say that it was incorrectly interpreted to be a 50 or 35% decrease. There's no way that's the case, they're saying. On average, they're seeing an average of about 5% less traffic compared to 2022. And they're claiming that part of the reason for that is the disruptive nature of AI. But I think Stack Overflow, to their claim, to their credit, is getting ahead of the curve here by introducing capabilities around AI, most notably Overflow AI. Did you hear about Overflow AI?
No, I haven't heard about it.
Oh, okay. Well, for those folks who missed the last episode of Deploy on Friday, we talked a little bit about this. So Overflow AI is Stack Overflow's answer to some of the stuff that's coming around GPT and various large language models, etc. So it's their way of providing better integration with Stack Overflow via a smart command line interface via AI. This is the term that they give it, Overflow AI. Not only are they doing it for search, but they're also doing it for generative AI. So they're helping you construct questions for Stack Overflow through this capability. In addition to that, they're also integrating with Slack and Teams. So not this keeper here, but they're adding this capability to Slack and also Visual Studio Code. So you can actually pose these questions, search for them if you wish, through these integrations. So you can do the @Stack Overflow bot and then pose questions, and it will give you answers through their chatbot there. So this is the marketing term that they've given it, Overflow AI. I kind of like it. And this is a facility that they're adding to Stack Overflow to not only ask questions, but also get answers.
That was going to be my question. So it'll generate you a question, or it will generate you an answer.
Yes, so it will help you search better. So I think we're starting to realize that search is kind of not so great, and we've got to utilize tooling for this. And I think this is one of the main reasons why AI is so popular these days, is because it's giving you a better way or a better means for asking questions. And so this blog post, which complements what I just showed, talks a little bit about, hey, the the rumors of our death are greatly exaggerated, so to speak. So they're looking at it probably about a 5% delta
Yeah.
between now and 2022. But they're upfront in the blog post. They talk about how AI is posing an interesting sort of opportunity rather than a
Yeah.
challenge, and so
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Interesting stuff.
Yes. So if you're interested at all, you can check out the Stack Overflow Labs. This is over at stackoverflow.co. And they list Overflow AI along with a bunch of other things as well. So you can check out those things if you're at all compelled to do so. So that's Overflow AI and some of the traffic relative to AI. This is a post over at the Grafana Labs blog. These are the folks who build out the amazing visualization tool for tracking, for tracing data and monitoring, etc., which is Grafana. And so they are experimenting with a bunch of ways of rendering out traces. So traces are the ways, it's one of the canonical ways in which you actually do observation. So observability, monitoring, etc. We talk about traces quite a bit. Tracing is basically an in-depth look at what's happening on a system. And so they're looking at improving a bunch of capabilities there. So minor ones like improving how trace headers are rendered, span filtering for easier search. So you can actually, when you create a trace, it's a collection of what are called spans. Spans are basically these bands that you see. It kind of a canonical, kind of similar to an analogy you might make is like the network graph or trace that you see in like your browser's dev tools.
Dev
A
tools,
span
yeah.
will basically be like, here's an entry point and then everything that falls underneath it. So an example might be, let's say I hit a middleware and then I hop over to the database. A span might trace the fact that I hit middleware, did some logic, then made a network call to the database, waited, and then stuff happened there. Then a return result came back. I processed and then sent a web request back to the originating client. So that would be in the case of a span. And this is a way in which you can actually now filter across these spans. This is something that they've added as well. So these are some of the sort of looks and feels. If you haven't seen Grafana before, this is some of the capabilities that you would typically see within Grafana. And this is not Grafana here. This is Grafana timing out on me the web address. So there you go. But yeah, that's great, awesome. Let's re-hit the page. Let's see if that will render out. Nope, I think it might be JavaScript on my end. Apologies for that. So, anyways, you can get a sense of this if you take a look at the URL that's at the top there. Configuration improvements around the code editor, etc. So just minor things as well. So this is some of the stuff that they're looking at relative to some of the trace visualization improvements they're adding to Grafana. So if you're at all interested, you could check it out at Grafana Labs, which is their top-end blog post.
The original dark theme Grafana, wasn't it?
That's right. That's right. I think they were definitely one of the first, and certainly in a variety of SaaS solutions out there that jumped wholeheartedly on dark mode. That's for sure. .NET Conf. Have you got this in your calendar yet?
I haven't. I've actually never made it to one of these, although it's one of those things that every year comes around and then I put it in my calendar and don't do anything about it.
I'm so disappointed. We've sponsored this event. Octopus has sponsored .NET Conf. So .NET Conf, November 14th to 16th. This is going to be the official date for the release of .NET 8. So .NET 8 will release at .NET Conf. November 14th to 16th. Everyone knew about that. It was coming in November, so they've just picked this as the date. This is their 2-day all-virtual event. It also has in-person events as well, but there's a whole slew of content that's available there. And in fact, you can actually submit a session to talk if you're so inclined. So they have a call for content that's open. This is using Sessionize. Sessionize is a wonderful platform for submitting your talks to a variety of conferences. And it's really easy to do so. So you set up a profile and you set up talks and abstracts and you just submit them. And so it makes it really easy to submit talks. But .NET Conf is coming November 14th. Mark your calendar. And there will be a ton of content there. They've also got the hashtag .NET Conf as well. We'll be participating as part of .NET Conf. So Octopus Deploy is going to sponsor this event. And there will be some... I guess there will be some prizes, etc. that will be announced, but I'll save that for when they announce the sponsors later. So there you go, .NET Conf. Sticking with .NET, just some minor updates relative to Visual Studio and the .NET framework. So every month there seems to be a security roll-up, patch upgrade, etc., etc. So just be aware that there's some CVEs that are out that you may want to take time to patch. So these are always important. So we'll just skip that. And then recently, Visual Studio 2022. I know you're a Rider fan, but I'll just mention it. So Visual Studio 2022 17.7 has been released. So this is the sort of upgrade to the Visual Studio proper experience. 17.8 Preview 1 shipped just afterwards. So this is a new set of capabilities that they're looking to integrate within Visual Studio. So you can see some of them here. So namely things like add reviewers to your PRs, new IntelliTest now in preview, new React TypeScript and ASP.NET combined templates, etc., etc. So lots of stuff that are being integrated as part of 17.8 Preview 1. I have anecdotally heard that some people had some problems with this release. I know it's just available, but we had a person notify us on another stream that I did earlier this morning that they were having some problems. But you can install these side by side, so that's no problem there. They've made this really a great experience, so feel free to check it out. They're adding some great features there. So here's an example, like adding reviewers to pull requests, as I said before. There's screenshots for all this stuff, summary diffs, etc. Case preserving find to replace. So find to replace is like one of my favorite capabilities of any IDE. So being able to do that. Visual Studio Code has a great one based around regex as well. So that's always powerful. So these and other capabilities are available, and this is part of 17.8 Preview 1. So definitely worth checking out.
Nice.
Switching gears a little bit, Go 1.21 or 1.21, depending on how you define it, is released. So this is a minor update to the toolset and language capabilities, along with some library changes as well. So some of the things that caught my attention, tool improvements are always a good thing, but those come all the time, basically as part of the Go language. But the language and standard library additions were the ones that I thought about were the most interesting to me. So namely some new built-in functions, so min, max, and clear, if you're doing any operations around those. Some better type inference for generic functions. Everything, basically, you don't have to cast everything as an interface now if you're doing any Go development. The one that I like are the standard library editions. So typically you'll find these in the sort of x/experimental libraries. So Go has this development sort of policy of anything that's going to go into a library first will land in this experimental or exp/library, and then once it gets stable, it will then evolve into the standard libraries that they complement. So in particular, they have standard libraries editions like log and slog for structured logging. Some new operations for slices, which are like arrays. So slices are a primitive construct you have in Go, and they're adding some operations there, which are great. So namely things like sorting operations, better algorithms around sorting. So that's always helpful. Maps, which are like dictionaries. So it's sort of like key value pairs, and they're adding some operations against those. So namely, you can do like diffs and things like that, which is great. And then a new CMP package, new utilities for comparing ordered values. So I think these are the ones that are going to probably be the most impactful for developers using Go. Everyone loves a standard library edition. And so these are some of the things that they're adding. This one caught my attention. They added this at the end, and I was like, a new port to WASI. Okay, so WebAssembly System Interface, or WASI. Looks like they're doing an experimental port there, which is interesting. So WebAssembly is this environment that you can run within the context of, say, a browser, and provides a native runtime experience relative to that. I think it's real powerful on the server. I've stated that for months, that WebAssembly, its real power comes in the fact that it's going to be enable a great plugin provider model for backend servers. But yeah, everyone thinks of WebAssembly as the sort of front end, but a new port to WASI. So there you go. So that's Go.21. And
sound like burying that down the bottom a bit there, doesn't
I
it?
know.
Yeah.
I know. Not sure what was going on there, but there you go. I'm just going to quickly switch gears over to Visual Studio, namely Visual Studio Code. July 2023 has shipped. They ship on an insane cadence. I don't know who's shipping faster, the TypeScript team or the Visual Studio Code team? They both tend to ship at the same cadence. I think they're kind of in co-opetition with each other. So a bunch of changes here, nothing ground shaking. This is a bit of a minor update here, but they've added some capabilities around, say, Juniper notebooks, or adding support for Git repositories with symlinks. If you haven't used symlinks, they're awesome, but and they've been around for years, but like people don't still know about them. I still meet people who are like, "What's a symlink?" Oh, okay. New diff editor capabilities, etc. So it'll give you better diff features relative to that environment. There's a bunch of other capabilities there, but they're mostly minor in my view. Nothing major relative to the updates. And you'll see these when you restart Visual Studio Code. So it's important to make sure that you don't have Visual Studio running for days on end without restarting it. So when you restart Visual Studio Code, you'll get the latest changes there, which is great. I talked about this last week, ReSharper 2023.2. Namely, there's this new feature here called Predictive Debugger Mode. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay.
Is AI in my debugger?
Maybe. It's like peanut butter and chocolate mixed together at once. It's not maybe. It's a little bit of that. So ReSharper is a wonderful facility. I would say arguably a must-have if you're doing anything around C#. And so ReSharper 2023.2 is available. A bunch of updates around C# and C++. I'm not going to focus on that. I want to focus mostly on the predictive debugger. I mentioned this last week. What the predictive debugger does, you have to opt into this experience, by the way, but what it does is as it runs, depending on when your breakpoint is, it will give you different semantic weights on lines. It will provide these annotations depending upon what it thinks is going to happen. So if I just pause here for a second. So the items lined in the lines that are marked in green are those ones that are going to execute. You'll notice that also the predictive debugger will give you a sense of what we think the value will be. And so it's gone ahead and said, okay, well, this value is anticipated to be this and this. The lines that are marked in red are ones that will not be executed, and then the ones that are in gray, green will be evaluated to true, meaning they'll execute mostly. Yeah. Red will be false, and then ones that are in gray will be ones that are predicted not to run. So the predictive debugger, so you'll notice that the breakpoint here is at the start. It's already gone ahead and said, okay, here's based on the inputs that you've provided, here's where we think things will go. So you don't have to actually step through to actually see it happen. You can already tell based on the first line of your debugger where things are going to lie. So that's the predictive debugger, and this is a beta feature in ReSharper 2023.2.
That's a really interesting feature.
Yeah. They have a dedicated, I mentioned this in the last episode, but if we take a look at the blog post, they talked a little bit about how, it's a game-changing look into the future. It's the future, sort of thing. So I like this last. So console.log, answer to everything. Yes. Hell yes. So console.log everywhere. And there's always these sort of step-by-step debugging. Step over, step over, step over. Should have stopped, stepped over. Yep.
That's the one. That's where it gets me every time.
Oh, yeah. The other one
you're like trying to drag it back up.
Yeah.
Can't quite do it. You've already mutated something.
The one feature that I know that a lot of folks don't tend to use is trace points. I don't know why people don't use trace points. So the difference between a breakpoint and a trace point, a breakpoint does what it says it does. It's going to break when it hits this point. A trace point, though, will simply continue execution and output a trace value to, say, the log when it hits that point. And I don't know why people don't use trace points. Maybe they don't know about them, but there you go. Yeah. So you have to opt into the predictive debugger. Once you've opted in, it then gives you this experience. And as they mentioned here, so expressions highlighted in green or red indicate whether it's going to be evaluated to true or false. Statements that are grayed out indicate the code path won't execute, similar to dead code. Inline values are displayed in blue, show predicted values after executing the corresponding statement, and then yellow or red inline hints show where the prediction ends. For example, when a method returns, an exception is thrown, or the program halts. So that's kind of what that's showing here. And that's the predictive debugger in ReSharper 2023.2.
I'm really interested to hear if people start using that a lot or not.
I have not heard a thing. I just saw the blog post, and like anyone, I'm making a value judgment based on my ignorant assumptions. Other
Doesn't seem like it's
features like
available in Rider
yeah,
either, though.
yeah. I know. Assembly diffs, that's always helpful, especially if you're using with multiple versions of I've had to use a decompiler many times in the past. Don't ask me why. Uh, Source code going missing, for example. We don't know what happened. The development team got hit by a bus. I don't know. Performance improvements, which is awesome. Always like perf for
Nice.
improvements. So during this release cycle, we've done a lot of work to improve the solution loading speed in ReSharper. I've heard of stories where people cannot load certain solutions in either Visual Studio or ReSharper, etc., because there's so many projects. Like I heard a story about a team that had literally 1,000 projects and they couldn't load it in Visual Studio because it just would crash, basically. So I think performance is good, but I think scalability is better. If you can start loading solutions that have hundreds, if not thousands, of projects, I don't know why. First, cry if you have that
Cry a
solution,
little bit.
and then that's right. First cry, and then all right, figure out how you can break it up. But if you can load it, that's awesome. So, anyways, that's ReSharper 2023 over at the JetBrain land. So, congrats to them on that release. Docker Desktop. Are you using Docker at all for your containers, images, etc.?
Yeah, we use Docker a lot now, dev
Yep.
environments.
Yep, we do. In fact, we have a lot of our images up on Docker Hub as well. So if you're curious, you can do search for Octopus Deploy up on Docker Hub, hub.docker.com, and you'll find all kinds of images there. So Docker Desktop 4.22, Resource Saver, Compose, Include, and Enhanced RBAC functionality. So the Resource Saver is the one I think that a lot of people are going to like. So typically, if you fire up Octopus in a container, in an image, which you can do, you may notice that your system performance tends to go down a little bit, and that's for good reason. I mean, we're a pretty beefy application. We use SQL Server. We use, we're hosting on, a bunch of files, etc. We're doing a lot of heavy duty sort of stuff, and so Resource Saver is a new feature that when it runs, whether on Mac or Windows, it will detect when Docker Desktop is not running containers and massively reduces its memory and CPU footprint. So this is nice. This is basically like if you've ever run back in the old days, a virtual machine, or you're running Docker with a heavy sort of container in an image, you may notice your system performance tends to slow down when you start running these containers. So Resource Saver will detect whether or not it's idle, and then without any active containers during a duration of 30 seconds, automatically reduces the memory and CPU footprint. So it's not going to save you from the requirements of the images themselves, but what it will do is actually relocate or reallocate, I guess is a better term. Resource Saver, that's why they've called it this, should speed up the performance of your host machine, which is great.
Yeah, 100%.
Split complex compose projects into multiple subprojects with include. So if you're using compose, which is what you can use to construct containers, so this is typically done via CLI. It's a great sort of facility. You'll point this. You'll typically so Docker Compose is a command based off the Docker CLI. You'll point it at a YAML description, and it just basically defines the configuration you want for a specific container. And so you can use Composer to basically modularize this stuff. And so now they have an include capability that allows you to simply point to a remote YAML document elsewhere, which is great. So you can compose these things really nice. So having an include section in your compose file allows you to split up your project into manageable subprojects, as they say. So that's a great innovation, if you ask me.
100%.
And then editor role.
Yeah.
Yep. Editor role available for organizations. So this is obviously around RBAC, role-based access, sort of rules, etc. So, something that we use a lot, but something to be aware of. So there you go. And then finally, certainly last but not leastly, our friends over at BuildKite, another Aussie company. They've got an article that they've written here. Sorry, this is the wrong one. I got the wrong one. Got the wrong one listed here. Sorry about that.
I thought we were going to talk about OIDC. It's been a hot topic lately.
It is. I mean, so I'll explain why. So if you take a look at our roadmap, for example, OIDC is something that we are actively thinking about. So sorry about that. We'll come back to that. But OpenID Connect allows you to basically utilize, a persistent identity relative between systems, etc. done via JSON Web Tokens, which are fun to work with. If you haven't already, you have my jealousy, because I've worked with them and they're not fun. But OIDC is important for basically not only federating in some cases identity, but also rights and values and claims, etc. So like if I have a certain identity, I can then authenticate myself to a remote resource, get claims against that resource, and then perform operations against that via an access token, which is what is provided here.
Yeah.
So in the context of GitHub, we're looking at doing this to build a GitHub app, which is on our roadmap. So this is under our planned category, and that's why we're talking about that. Did you have something to say about OIDC?
No, I'm just really looking forward to this feature. I know, like this first step of setting up a pipeline and like, I got to go to the security team, get the keys. They can't. They've got to put the keys in. I can't have the keys, so they've got to go and put it in. Like, it just adds so much friction to setting up projects and new pipelines.
You think?
This is something that's going to be awesome.
Yes,
for people who work inside organizations like that. Yeah.
Sorry, the article I did want to mention here is this one that they talked about integrating via plugins through HashiCorp Vault. So we've written actually a set of plugins for BuildKite. So if you go to buildkite.com, I believe down at the bottom they list their plugins. Is that right? Yes. All right. So if we take a look at their plugins page, which is at /plugins, you can do a search here. These are actually very simple ways in which you can integrate. And we have ones for Octopus. So we support namely pushing build info. So that's basically the commits that are present within BuildKite. Create release, which allows you to basically create a snapshot of your release. And then runbook is another one that we have as well. So in their article here, they talk about how to create plugins. And they use HashiCorp Vault as the example. If I can, wow, I don't know why it's doing, it's populating my history with so many entries. So extending BuildKite with plugins, HashiCorp Vault. So they talk a little bit about how you can build these, and it's very easy to build these. They're just shell scripts basically. So and they have a whole lifecycle associated with plugins. So there's these hooks that you can jump into if you're wanting to build a BuildKite plugin. And these are pre and post events for a variety of things relative to BuildKite. And then BuildKites will, and everyone seems to be premised around the same thing. You have this notion of a job and you have a life cycle. And whether you're GitHub, GitLab, Octopus, etc., you have this sort of same sort of notion of, something's happening and then something executes. Everything is all down to a workflow these days. I'm convinced we're all just workflow engines. So a plugin is basically hooking into that. And then they talk about how it's structured. So you define this. Actually, it's later on where they talk a little bit about this. So they define a shell script here, and then that shell script allows you to integrate with a Vault location. So this is a remote location via Vault, and then you can execute those shell scripts very simply. And so we wrote ours using targeting a shell script, and that's all you have to do basically to run these plugins. And so there's a bunch of plugins listed, as I said before, at /plugins, and you can take a look at those exactly if you're all interested. So I love the folks at BuildKite. I think they have a wonderful product, great CI solution, and super performant based in part on Go, which kind of explains why. And they also espouse a hybrid model, which I like a lot. The idea is that your code never leaves your organization. So the federated part of organizing your CI agents, that is the front end, this thing that you see here, this runs in the cloud somewhere, but then the remote agents themselves can run behind your firewall, and then they just send messages saying, grab the source, build locally, and then tell us the result, etc. And so this is a hybrid model for that approach. And so, yeah, it's part of the reason why I'm a fan of them. Also because they're Australian, so there you go. Anyway, that wraps up the week that was relative to Octopus. Jim, I'm glad you're back. I hope you're feeling better. I know that you're on the mend, which is good. And we do this show every week, so if you're all inclined to feel free and reach out and let us know what's on your mind, feel free to reach us on social media or send us a comment. We're available there. And in the meantime, on behalf of Jim, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you here next week. Again, same time, same place on Deploy on Friday. Take care, everyone.